Sup nerds, I'm Tom.
And I'm Aaron.
And we're talking about Karuba by Haba Games. And this game is...
Game Night Approved!
Oh, I regret saying yes to this.
So if you've ever played bingo, then you've played Karuba.
No.
It does have a very interesting way that the tiles are drawn, and like when I first was listening to the rules, I'm like, this is like bingo. One player is drawing a tile and saying, okay, 13, and we all get to play the 13 tile. The real object is to get your adventurers to the temples, and the temples are kind of set up depending at the beginning of the round, like everybody sets them up.
It says cooperatively. It just means like we all do it together. Like I say, okay, the blue guy is here and the blue temple is here, and then everybody does that, and then you say,
I choose yellow, and the next person chooses the...
Right, so it's not, cooperatively isn't an accurate term, but it's the idea of like, we all get to choose one. In a way though, I could be like, I'm going to put this blue here and this blue real close because you put that yellow real far away. Mm-hmm. You're going to be working on trying to get to that yellow. I'm just going to bolt for the blue.
But since everybody's board will have the same goals, I can also shoot for that same one quick. It's just who's going to take the chance of, if I, draw the 13 and I'm like, okay, I can place this on my board and I can get a gem, but it doesn't have a cross section on it. So if I lock this onto my board somewhere, if I decide to put it there, I'm now saying that I can't ever cross it in a different direction. So I have to be pretty sure about putting it there. Or I could burn it and move one of my adventurers' spaces equal to the number of exits, which is 2 on this one. So if I had already had a couple tiles laid out, I could move. So it seems like everybody would or could do the exact same thing, but like 2 or 3 turns in, you kind of have like different maps going on, which is really interesting.
Yeah, everybody's board state starts out the same, but there's 2 options that you can do with your tile. You can burn it or you can place it, but where you can place it, there's a ton of different options. So yeah, nobody's going to have the exact same map unless you put it down and I'm watching you and I'm going right after you. And that is another thing is that it's kind of like a gentleman's game of you're supposed to, I think you can on other turns or after you've made your decision, look at the other people and be like, okay, so he's going for purple. Maybe I shouldn't go for purple and just go for green because nobody's going for green, or not green, blue because nobody's going for blue. But there are rules in there about what to do if we're kind of at a stalemate because I'm like, well, if I don't want to burn this now if you're going to burn it because you're going to get there and get the 5. And if I can't get that 5, I'm going to want to come over to this, So there is a little bit of like, look, just be nice to each other. Just like be truthful and kind of mostly pay attention to your own board. Don't wait and see what everybody else is going to do to make your decision. Or especially if you're the one playing bingo and I had this problem, I'd be like, are you guys ready? And I'd be like looking at it and Aaron's like, look, you're getting more time to think about it than we are, kind of, because you could be like, okay, it's 23 and I'm burning it to take this, ha!
Yeah, exactly. There is that little bit of, if you're playing ungentlemanly, you could totally just like, okay, I get 4 movement out of this. You guys ready? It's 16, and I'm running with it. Well, if I would have known that was coming. This is a very solo feeling game, though. It's very what I'm doing doesn't really affect anyone else, except if I get to a temple first, I'll get the highest point token that's still available. It is like a race, but it is a very solitaire game.
It is probably the solitaire game, or the game that feels solitaire, that I like the most. And it's actually kind of surprised that I like it because it's a solitaire game. Now, that's usually an issue that I have with a lot of games. Like, even in our review for Anachrony, I was like, one of the main complaints is that, you're placing your workers all on this main board, but as you're building up spots for you to place workers on your own board, you're interacting with each other less and less. Here, even though I'm not interacting, 1, the game is really quick, and 2, the game is really puzzly, and what I'm doing, I'm thinking about it so much, if I had to also really, really base those decisions on other people, it would be too much.
Yeah, if you are trying to look at what everybody else is doing, you can get to a point where you're thinking too much. You're like, okay, if this tile comes up next, I should just place the tile that we just drew in this spot. If the one I hope comes next, or one, there's a couple that are the same shape. So if you're looking for a certain tile, you can kind of okay, I just need this shape. If this one comes up next, I'll put it here, and then the next turn, no matter what it is, I'm just burning it and moving, and burning it and moving, and I'm just going to make a mad dash. And I can do it in X amount of turns if I only move 2, but if I move 3 or 4 spaces, I can really get across the map.
Yeah, that is one thing that you do. It is important to know, because I've played this game before, but most recently we sat down, and it was my first time ever being the bingo person, where you just draw. So they have their tiles all out in front of them, face up, so they like know how many crosses there are and how many threes and how many whatevers. And I just, on like this second or third tile, I just plopped a cross down in an area that didn't need to be a cross. And I wasn't thinking about like, oh, those crosses are rare. Those need to go in high traffic areas. Or like, had 2 temples kind of close to each other, and I'm like, I am doing nothing. All my dudes are moved. Everything is where it needs to be until I draw a cross. Until that happens, I'm drawing it and burning it for no movement because everything else is blocked. Mm-hmm. Like, so you can really screw yourself over if you don't know the value of the tile you have in your hand.
There is another way to score points, and it's with these the crystals and the gold pieces that get put onto the board. If you are able to stop on that tile, you pick it up, which I actually played Karuba the card game first, and that we'll talk about in another video. But in that one, you just collect the gems for crossing the path. And this one, you have to actually stop on that tile to collect it. And it really, my first turn, I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to put this right here in front of this guy. It's 1 space away, that's fine, whatever. I didn't, like, the strategy that I should have been thinking about is placing it at least 2 spaces out, because every tile could be burnt, has at least 2 movements. So I'm going to move 1, 2, and then I can land on that, not feel like I'm wasting movement, because I can move just 1 and get the gem, but I feel like I've wasted 1 additional movement I could have taken. Unless you know that if you looked at your path, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to have to take a 1 movement eventually, like, oh, it's worth it. Like, there's a lot of multiple plays of this game will really benefit you in knowing how far to space things, and, because you could just, first turn, you could put something right out in the middle, and if you don't kind of know what you're going to build to it, then it might not work out for you.
Right, because Karuba the card game, and this isn't a review for Karuba the card game, that one is not as much a race as this is. Mm-hmm. But I liked the dichotomy there of like, well, you want to bum rush to get all the way to the temple first, but also you want to stop to get these gems. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit of like, well, you want to go fast, but also you kind of want to take your time and make sure you're picking up as many gems as you can. So I liked that you want to do both, but you can't.
I think that Karuba is an excellent little solitaire, bingo-esque puzzle game where you are racing to collect points. Like, there's not many other games that I can think that play this way. It's a tile-laying game. You're trying to make a path, but it's also a race. And having the multi-use of the tiles is very interesting because, now I have to choose, do I want to place it here and set up my next path, or do I want to burn it and just start moving this guy so I can be the first one to the temple and get the 5 points instead of getting, 2 or 3 points for getting there last. It's really interesting that, it plays 4, but if you were to get multiple copies of this, you could play with 8, 12, 16 players. Like, it would be crazy. Like, everybody's just like, bingo! I got there first! Like, it would really feel like bingo if you had that many players.
I don't know exactly how they do this, if they because we've been recommended by Haba that, hey, you can do that if you want to. I would say if you add like a 5th player, add an extra 2 on the bottom of the stack. If you add a 6th player, add an extra 3 would be my recommendation. But again, I do highly recommend this. I guess if you don't really like those solitaire type games, or games that feel solitaire even though it does kind of matter what you're doing with the other people, then yeah, maybe this won't hit home for you. Again, I was pretty surprised at how much I liked it, so there's that, because I generally don't like the solitaire-only games, but it's fast enough and quick enough and puzzly enough with what you're doing on your own board that it still feels like it was a lot of fun time, even though I wasn't truly interacting with everybody else at the table all that much, but still highly recommend it.
If anything you heard here sounds awesome and you would like to get yourself a copy, you can scroll down to the description box down below and click on the link to get yourself one.
And hey, while you're down there, make sure you subscribe to our channel so you're never
bored.
I didn't even say it worked. It worked.
Bored. You're
That's
never
fine.
bored. We're never bored. You're never bored.
There you go. I guess if you don't really like the solitaire type of games, this might not hit you home. God.